Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Elvish, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Genetec, and I'm happy to welcome you to panel number 4 in our Innovate Everyday series, Identity as the New Perimeter. I'm thrilled that you're able to take the time to join us this morning. I think we have an amazing panel lined up for you to tackle some big issues that are at the forefront of both physical security and cybersecurity. Today, we'll hear from 4 leading industry experts around how identity is defining the new perimeter and the concerns and benefits that come from an identity-based approach to access control. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite out to the stage, if you will, my 4 colleagues. Come on out, everyone. There's JP, look at that. Hello, Jonathan, Despina, and hi. Excellent. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, JP.
Morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Hello. Thank you for taking the time to join me, everyone. We've got a great audience online this morning. I thought maybe we could start with a round of introductions, what you do, who you are. So I'm going to start right here to this side of me, which is JP Debbie. You're the furthest away, so why don't you kick us off, JP?
All right, so good morning and good afternoon for the people dialing from Europe, and good evening from APAC. So yeah, my name is Jean-Philippe Deby. I'm responsible for the building industrial markets in Europe. So effectively, this is our B2B customer base with a strong focus on what we call regulated markets. And the reason I'm here is actually the whole topic is really hot, I would say, in the regulated market. So we've been having, let's say, a conversation now for many months around this topic, and I'll try to share some of the knowledge which I've gained.
Well, that would take much more than an hour to share your knowledge, JP, but we'll do our best to get the very best nuggets out of it. Jonathan, good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Doyon, or Joe Doyon. I've been with Genetec since '98. I was one of the first engineers working on our video solution at that time. And now I'm leading actually a new group that we call ClearID. ClearID is a solution that probably some of you have heard, but basically it's a solution to simplify the management of access control. And we're going to cover some of those topics today with you guys.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Jonathan. I think it'll be really, really interesting. Despina, look at you in the sun. How are you this morning?
Good morning and good afternoon. Yes, my name is Despina Samatelos, Product Marketing Manager for Access Control, as well as ClearID that Joe just mentioned. I'm excited to be here this morning as companies start to look at deconfining and how they can do that safely. And managing identities is one way of really doing that correctly.
Great. Thank you, Despina. And finally, last but not least, Ty, say hello to our audience.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Ty Miller. I'm our business development manager here in the Northeast United States. Similar to JP, I work in our buildings and industrials vertical market. So I work with a lot of our regulated customers that have the joy of undergoing routine audits and are heavily regulated. So this topic is top of mind for a lot of them, and many of them have or are in the process of deploying physical identity access management systems. So I look forward to discussing with you guys and sharing that today.
Thank you very much, Ty. I'm looking forward to this chat as well, because identity and managing identities has now become the backbone of infrastructure management and enforcement of security policies. And now, in the time of the pandemic, it's become even a more pressing concern as we deconfine and go back to work and implement sophisticated policies to sort of split cohorts up so that we don't have too much density in our offices. And of course, Ty, you even mentioned it, the challenges of auditing in contractor-heavy industries. There's a lot of concerns to look at. So let's get going with our discussion. I want to kick it off sort of baselining our discussion today and taking a look at what is identity. We hear a lot about identity on the physical side, And we also hear a lot about identity on the logical side, or sort of the cybersecurity side of things, and the end of firewalls and how they're becoming obsolete. I thought I would kick it over to you, JP. What is physical identity access management? Can you give us a very high-level look at what that is?
Yeah, so and probably I'll pass it to Ty a little bit later on with his famous 3As. Perhaps he will place that later in the conversation. But basically, today to define access to a physical building, I mean, there's three main elements. I mean, one, the identity, the card holder, who you are as an individual. Eventually, the information that goes around it, in which department you are. Are you a contractor? Are you a full-time employee? After that, you have the credential, which is basically the identifier. So cards are often used today. I mean, at least in a corporate type of offices. But there we see really a big boom in terms of credential. I mean, biometrics is very hot and obviously is a stronger identifier. But then also we see a new type of identifiers like mobile credential. But it all goes down to even new electronic keys to open electronic locks. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then after that, I mean, the third element is really the rules, the access right. Let's say that you have to actually enter. What are your rights in terms of being able to enter a certain area, a certain door at what time and on what day. So the schedule notions.
So much of that in the past has just been built on, here's your card at onboarding, and you have access to a certain number of doors within the building, and good luck to you. And then, over time that may or may not change. But Jonathan, why is it so important to have a product that manages identities such as this?
Yeah, the challenge we've seen with people with a decent amount of cardholders, let's say hundreds of cardholders, is like people in organization now are moving, right? They're maybe I'm based in Montreal today, but like in a year from now, I'll be based in Paris, and people need systems that can adapt to the reality. And if you look within an organization, you have data about your employees, but usually the way access control has been designed for years, it's always been a separate system. Even though I have an HR database that tells me that Andrew Elvish is VP of Marketing based in Montreal, someone had to manually program the access that makes sense for Andrew Elvish. And whenever you change or you're based in a different location, someone has to manually go and modify your access policies to make sure that you now have access to that new building. Now with a PIM solution, the idea is to be able to link that source of data, your HR system, your database of contractor, and automate the access management, the policies that you're going to basically define policies, and automatically, if Andrew moves from Montreal to Paris, his access in Montreal will be revoked, and he's going to be granted access to the Paris office. So really, that becomes really, really powerful when you have multiple facilities, different type of employees with different type of access. When you have contractors that are coming from a different source of data, because contractor might not be in your Active Directory, they might not be in your HR system, they might be in a separate database. So PIM system allow you to link all that data and create policies that are going to simplify the management of access and avoid those manual step or forms that you need to send to people. Like whenever someone changes a department, you fill a form. Like this can be entirely automated when you use PIM systems.
Yeah, taking out the human element, right, Joe? I mean, making this as automated as possible. And I think what you said there about the policies and the process is huge, because that can be adhered to whatever that organization's policy and process is, right? It's not some out of the box, this is the way it is, access control, rigid type software. It's adaptable to the policies and procedures that organization wants to follow. And JP mentioned it with the 3 A's, right? So that's one thing that kind of stood out in my mind, that PMs really follow a structure of, who has access to what areas during what amount of time. And the amount of time piece is what makes it somewhat unique as opposed to a traditional access control system, right? Because you're granting a temporary access to an individual, and as you mentioned, as JP mentioned, somebody doesn't have to remember, oh, I need to go back and revoke access for such and such individual. You know, that's one of the challenges with access control databases, that they can become polluted over time, and this sort of limits that from happening.
And Ty, you mentioned removing the human error, and I think ultimately what that does is enforce your security. So removing that, you know, human aspect and the possible errors that could happen through it, you're enforcing your security by better managing your accesses.
Yeah, perhaps just one comment on the human error. I think there's always going to be a human element, but I think what is interesting with PM is that it's providing the decision making to the right individual within your organization. So again, you have to think, you know, today, if you need to access your office, let's say during the weekend, you know, how do you go about doing that, and who is going to be granting you that? I mean, typically it might be, let's say, a security guard, or perhaps arriving, let's say, in another office of your company, might be somebody at the reception. Ultimately, is it the right person to take that decision? I think where the PM comes in is really to direct through the workflow and the automation, the decision power to the correct person who should grant that access.
Yeah, JP, you took the words right out of my mouth. That idea of flexibility seems to be a big part of the PIAM, or physical identity and access management model, that ability to request to an area owner access at whatever time of day you may need it, if it's urgent. Because I know even you know, at our own business, you know, you'd have to call security, and you know, maybe talk to the receptionist. It'd be very difficult. And Despina, I want to bring that over to you. So, you know, was flexibility, you know, one of the benefits that you see of bringing a PIAM solution like ClearID to an access control solution like Synergis?
Absolutely, flexibility as well as improving efficiencies and operations on a daily basis. You just mentioned about, you know, asking the receptionist to give you access to a particular area, or her managing the different area owners. And that can be very time consuming. In our own business, as you mentioned before, ClearID, when I had to meet Joe in his office, I didn't have access. And then who do I ask for access? We emailed someone, that person was on vacation. It took a while, and Joe just had to come down and unlock the door for me. As you could imagine, that could be a bit annoying and also time consuming. So as we were mentioning, with a physical identity and access management system, I'm able to go in and ask requests automatically. The system will use a workflow-based approach and ask the right area owner to provide me that access. My access will be on a temporary basis. If they want to provide it for a few days, at the end of those days, my access is revoked. So you could imagine how easily that's done, how it improves efficiencies. And really, again, back to security. I don't have access to areas when I don't need to be there. So that really helps improve efficiencies and security as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to refer to it as decentralizing the management of the access control system. So just like Despina said, those area owners can then routinely audit who has access to their specific doors within the facility. And if they identify someone during that audit that, hey, you know, Joe's not supposed to have access here, let me pull him out. It's that I guess micromanagement of your area that's so powerful, because in a single global access control system, you may not be looking at who has access to every individual area. So things can slip through the cracks pretty easily.
And if I could add, in these times, as I was mentioning at the beginning of this panel discussion, as organizations are looking to deconfine, without having a physical identity and access management system, you could imagine it looks like Mount Everest, right? All these people that have access to different areas, which areas are you going to allow them to go into, thinking of occupancy management. With physical identity and access management, the area owner will go in and say, you know what, I'm going to limit this area to 30 individuals. I'm only going to give them access half of the amount of time. You know, already occupancy management becomes much easier using a physical identity and access management system, which is not top of mind oftentimes when thinking of occupancy management.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, Despina. And I think to the point that you've all been making now, this idea of decentralization actually brings a higher level of situational awareness to access control into the areas. I mean, even security, certainly receptionists don't often know the intricacies of what's going on in an individual secure room, whether that's a server room or, in my case, the supply cupboard of all the marketing giveaways we have. So it should be up to the marketing communications manager to manage the access to that area, because he'll know if some of those baseball hats go missing. I'm going to throw it over to you, Jonathan. A lot of people, when we're discussing physical identity and access management and clear ID in relation to our Synergist access control platform, say, why do I need a PIAM? I've already got Microsoft Active Directory. Isn't it the identical thing? So is it the same thing, Jonathan? What is
Yeah. Yeah, so one thing that people do with Active Directory, right, they're gonna create groups, AD groups, and they're gonna assign access to those AD groups. But Active Directory will give you a synchronization between your access control and everybody that's part of that Active Directory. There's a few challenges when you use Active Directory, is the fact that even though you're using AD groups, someone has to manually put Andrew Elvish as Montreal employee, and whenever Andrew is no longer in Montreal, someone has to manually put Andrew as a Paris employee, as an example. So the manual process is still there. The value of Active Directory is simply that as soon as I deactivate a profile in my Active Directory, automatically they get deactivated in the access control. But that's basically one level of automation. PIM gives you an extra level where instead of having to manually manage those groups, you can define a policy that's going to say, if Andrew Elvish location is Montreal, automatically he's going to get access to those areas, or he's going to be part of that group. And whenever someone in the HR system change where you're located, or change your title, change where you report to, the policies will kick in, and it will revoke you access and grant you access. So you no longer need to manually put people in different groups. The system will do it. The other issue with Active Directory is, in some organization, not every cardholder is part of Active Directory. Typically, Active Directory will contain people that have access to a computer. If you're in a large organization where they have production employees, maybe those production employees don't even exist in Active Directory. They're going to exist in your HR system, maybe. Maybe they exist in a contractor database. PIM allows you to synchronize multiple sources of data and make sure that they have a consistent set of policies all managed in one place. So you could have employees coming from AD, you could have contractors coming from a database, you could have another set of employees coming from another HR system because you've done an acquisition recently. So ClearID allows you, or PIM system allows you to bring or funnel all different sources of data and then have a consistent set of policies to manage all those people in one system. And you can even have people that you create manually as well. But still, they will fall into that same set of policies that you've defined.
So Ty, I'm going to bring it over to you. In the buildings and industrials market, this must be a huge benefit for them. Can you tell us, first of all, what exactly is the building and industrials market, and then tell us why this is such a huge benefit for that type of user?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, because there's probably some people out there saying everything's a building. So what does that mean? Joe, that was very well said, though. In the buildings and industrials vertical, which encompasses, like I said in the beginning, a lot of the regulated customers out there. So folks in utilities and energy, folks in healthcare, folks in oil and gas, a lot of those very heavily either government or state regulated entities fall into that category. And they all have to comply with very regular and sometimes heavy routine audits. And this identity management platform, or PM, is designed to help them keep their arms around who's coming and going and accessing their facilities, and then automating, as Joe put very eloquently, and making sure that I can give you an example. So we have a customer who's implemented a physical identity access management solution because they were running into an issue where every time a contractor came to their facility, they had to issue both a physical access badge as well as a key, right? A physical key. And anytime any of those weren't returned, that constituted a security breach for the customer. So they would be failing audits because they had these security breaches on their record. So they were spending an enormous amount of time, energy, effort, and money trying to investigate and track down these credentials. So as JP pointed out in the beginning, just being able to manage the various credentials that you're issuing to these different groups can be a huge savings. And this specific customer I'm referring to recognized an ROI in 4 months after implementing a physical identity access management system. So it was a no-brainer for them. They realized they had a problem, and a PM was the solution for them.
That's amazing, and I think that's where we're seeing the fit. JP, you know, when we look at these large regulated businesses, you know, Ty brought up the fact of, you know, sort of the security of it. I think, does it also involve the ability to be more flexible in how you manage your employees and their access? Can you talk a little bit about that in the regulated market space?
Yeah, I mean, there's so, you know, Ty, well, first of all, there's the regulation, and then also Ty mentioned contractors. So, you know, regulations, you know, can be, you know, what is an individual's ability to operate a machinery or to be, let's say, in a certain area. Let's take an oil refinery, for example, where to be able to be there, they need to, for example, have a certain certification in place, which they need to renew on a regular basis. So it might be, you know, every year they have to go through a safety test, and obviously it's not going to be calendar. It depends when people start and so forth. So you'll have, it's different individuals going into a refinery where they need to be in order with their safety certification, because if not, obviously that would go against the regulations, and it could impact the organization. So the benefit of the PM is, you know, like Jonathan mentioned, you can tie a PM with many databases, and including trading databases, and basically keep track. If, for example, JP going into a refinery in Amsterdam, for example, well, yesterday, Monday, could have been the last day of my certification. So yesterday, I was allowed to be there, but perhaps I was negligent, I was on holiday, I didn't recertify, and, you know, today I'm not able to go there because I don't have my certification. So basically, the benefit of the PM is that it's going to be able to reach out and grab this information, so that nobody has to keep track of that, and you know, at a gate to say, hey, JP, you didn't do your certification. No, JP will try to batch, and I won't be able to go into the factory. The other element, I think, is the contractors. I mean, you know, definitely a lot of companies in oil and gas, but, you know, organizations in general that you go, you know, through telecoms or in the food industry rely on third-party contractors. And the benefit of the PM is also to, you know, to push the responsibility for outsourcing agencies or third-party contracting companies to make sure that the people that they send on site are in order with their certification, because me as a company, you know, I might not know, let's say, all of the details of this contractor, which is going to come to me. This is really the responsibility of the contracting company. So the PM can also be the link towards external companies for them to manage and really to make sure, let's say, that the people that they send on site are in orders with their you know, certification, or, you know, whatever is required for them to be able to be on the physical site. So those are, let's say, you know, a couple of the, you know, the big discussion aspects that we have with a lot of companies in the regulated industry.
Yeah, and just one more thing I want to add to that, JP, spot on with all of that, is on one hand, it's all about, you know, making sure that you're automating these policies, and, you know, like I mentioned, you're adhering to these audits. But on the other hand, it's really mitigating risk for that customer, because they're making sure that the wrong folks aren't coming on site that may not have such and such training and certification in place. So making sure that folks stay safe, and really the right people are coming on site, and keeping the risk level low for those customers.
Correct.
Absolutely. Despina, It sounds great. This is an amazing picture that JP, Ty, and Joe are painting here, but it sounds like it might be really complex to implement one of these PIAM solutions.
In the past, it actually has been. So PIM is not something new necessarily to the market. It has been around. However, it was pretty much reserved for organizations that had a lot of capital and were able to invest both time and money in implementing one of these systems. Oftentimes, it took about 3 years to really implement the system because it was a lot of steps had to be taken and customize it to the organization's needs. However, now what we are seeing is a surgence of PIMs that are out of the box, cloud-based, super easy to install, using a unified approach to really tie in the access control with their physical identity and access management system. And so we've taken out that complexity of installing these systems. It's also opened it up to the everyday organization, not only the ones that have the deep pockets. So it is much easier for everyone to access.
Wow, 3 years? Did you really just say it took 3 years?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now it's pretty much plug and play, much easier to install and move ahead with it.
That makes our CRM implementation look like a tiny little project. JP, I want to come back to you because as our resident European on the panel, you get tagged with answering all of my questions about privacy. You talked about databases and contractor databases and lots of data going into this PIAM system. Well, how does that mesh with GDPR and other privacy regulations like the CCPA and things like that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously that you have a PM or you don't have a PM, you're going to be holding, let's say, personal information in your access control system. So it's well, overall, you have to make sure, let's say, how do you manage this information? I mean, the benefit of the PM is obviously that you sort of concentrate, let's say, all of the information in an area instead of spreading it all over your organization. So it's sort of start to simplify, let's say, your security plans. After that, I think it's very important for you to to see where the PM resides. I mean, ourselves, we developed a Clear ID on Microsoft Azure. The reason why is because well, nothing is totally secure, but Microsoft Azure is probably the most secure data center infrastructure that we see in the market. So we have, let's say, the confidence and the trust to put the information there because it meets all of the requirements, including GDPR requirements in Europe. So security is very important when you consider PM or anything in general. So where do you host the information? On the flip side of that, what's interesting with PM and there we're discussing around the ability to to bring information from a training department. For example, one interesting thing with PM is that one of the rules that you could put in your workflow is that somebody accessing the building, because you might be collecting information also with CCTV or other type of sensors, is that they provide their consent to come into the building, and the PM could be what would help you basically push the process of the person saying, okay, I'm going to be visiting your offices, or as an employee, I'm going to be working in your offices. So as part of that process, I need to fill in a consent form, and the PM will be able to register that. It's only once it registered that it will then go to the next step of giving you access. So it's an interesting, let's say, element through the PM in this ability to to manage consent, which is very important to data privacy regulations. Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, that's really good. That's really good.
Jonathan, I want to bring it over to you. Good thing you answered there while I was coming off of mute. So it sounds like the PIAM solution, and these sort of new breed of PIAM solution like Clear ID have sort of revolutionized this identity management or identity as an access control perimeter. I wonder, if you could talk a little bit about where the impetus for this product came from. I mean, you have been in the lead of this product, and you've taken it to market. Can you give our audience some idea of
Sure.
what that looks like?
Yeah, we've been in access control for a decent amount of years now, and we had different type of customer, like customer with hundreds, thousands of cardholder, and they keep saying, okay, but the way you guys do access control and all the other vendors do access control in the market is not how we operate. And they explain to us, right, that we have stakeholders and they're not necessarily in security who needs to grant access. We have policies that we need to make sure to respect regulation, and we need a way where we can codify those policies in the system. And that's how, talking with them, like different customer, different verticals, that's how we built and understood what they need, and then design a solution that now we call Clear ID. And one challenge they mentioned also with these guys, they say, okay, we know that PIM exists in some companies offer PIM today, but it's super expensive. It's almost basically it's a framework that you need to code everything. So we need a solution that can be off the shelf, simpler to deploy, simpler to manage. And working with these guys, feedback from different customers, that's how we came and designed Clear ID. And at the same time, GDPR was announced, and then we were able to design Clear ID to be able to mitigate the risk of having data with GDPR by segmenting the data. So like GP mentioned, with Clear ID, we're using Microsoft Azure, but the idea is if we have people that are based in Europe, their data will be stored in a European data center. If we have employees based in the US, their data will be stored in the US data center. It's totally transparent to the user, but we're trying to mitigate the risk and minimize the risk that comes with GDPR regulations. So, but that was great, yeah.
If I could add to that as well, I think traditionally customers looked at their security as an expense and a capital expenditure. Right now they're looking at how they could get a return on their investment through their security. And we've seen that a lot on the access control side, where we're helping our customers improve their operations and giving them insights on their everyday business. And then what physical identity and access management does is add that extra layer of decision making, helping customers make those better decisions using that workflow-based approach to automate the whole process. So it's really about returning on their investment, and that's where the market is really going.
Despina, I want to stay with you for a minute. You very graciously sent me a really excellent report last night from IHS Markit, and I took a read through it. And one of the key points in there is that clients are, as you say, looking for ROI on their security and physical security systems, but also that they're looking for unification and that sort of transparency of operation. Do you think with Clear ID and Synergist there's a unique combination there? And can you talk a little bit about this trend?
Absolutely. One of the challenges that customers often face is being able to put together different systems, be it their access control, be it their video, and try to integrate them, as we say in the market, and make them work together. But different systems are not necessarily made to work together. And when you're thinking about upgrading, maintaining, that's all done separately. And there's often a swivel chair approach to managing their whole security system. When you have a unified system, which is the approach we've taken with Clear ID, unifying it really with our access control Synergist, as well as with the rest of our security portfolio, the customer really manages everything from one single platform. It pulls in all the information from the different security solutions and brings them together for the customer to be able to take better decisions. Again, I just spoke about making the decision making. That's very important, and speed is essential, and having a unified approach improves that efficiency and allows customers to make quicker decisions and react to possible events much faster.
Okay. Efficiency, ease of use, centralizing those databases. I want to talk about something that sounded very, scary, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Ty, and it's a word nobody likes to hear in your personal life or in your professional life, which is the word audits. Anyway, everything is filed here, but I want to know a little bit about the pain of audits. And JP, feel free to jump in, but Ty, you spoke on this very eloquently when we were doing pre-brief. What is the issue with audits here?
Yeah, our customers don't like that word either. I can promise you that. It can be painful for them. It can be costly. A lot of the customers I deal with have dedicated folks that's their sole job, is to work through these routine, regular audits. They call it audit season that they're coming up on. So they have the privilege of trying to comply with whatever the state or government regulation is for that territory or that industry. And a lot of the times, a lot of it's based around their access control system and who's getting access, where, when, why, and being able to capture all that information is important. I think somebody mentioned it, maybe Despina, but capturing the reason why somebody's requesting access to a certain area is vital. And a lot of access control systems don't do that. So there's a lot of functionality that's built into what we've developed with the Clear ID product. And as Joe pointed out, it's more of an out-of-the-box solution that's quicker and easier to deploy. It doesn't require a ton of customization. So that's one thing that you find with traditional PM systems, is that they're very, very customized in nature. And with that complexity, and I've heard Joe use this term before, is it's almost like a customized work of art. So you have a customized work of art for each individual system, and with that, it's very costly to maintain moving forward. And as Despina said, upgrades can become a problem. But taking that back to audits, it's all of that man hour and energy and a cumbersome process of being flagged for certain things that you don't comply with, and then having to go back, make corrections. That's all very, very costly. So when some of the customers that I've worked with have looked at that, they said, wow, we're spending an enormous amount of time trying to comply with these audits. There's got to be a better way, right? So what can we improve about our policy, about our processes, and even our technology that we're using to comply with these audits? And that's when they've come upon an identity management platform, and how that's going to streamline the process for them. They're going to comply with reporting. They're going to be able to say who's coming and going where, when, and why, and all that's very important to appease those pesky auditors.
And I want to bring it over to you, JP. Like, Ty brings up an amazing point. And I've heard stats like some companies are spending 2 months per quarter just to do their quarterly reporting on access control systems. I mean, this is a massive burden. Can you give us a sense of, what the risk is and why companies are spending so much time and energy on these audits, JP?
Yeah, so I'll give some feedback there, and then also have a positive spin to audits, at least from a money-making standpoint. So indeed, I mean, the issue is that once you are, especially in multinational environment where you have, let's say, multiple offices, you're going to be demultiplying databases. Obviously, the audit department is not going to be tied with the security department, which are perhaps granting the rights to access or issuing cards, or perhaps it's the real estate department who's doing that, but utilizing the security department system to do it. So what we've seen with customers, and they've been very candid about it, is that over time you have a lot of ghost card holders or ghost credential being deployed and sort of growing, let's say, throughout the system. It's very logical, because in a multinational environment, people are going to be traveling from offices to offices, and they might have to be entered into an office database. I can assure you that they will not be removed from that office database. So over time, what is happening is that imagine that me as an employee, for reason X or Y, I leave Genetec tomorrow is that in my main office, certainly the HR department will speak with security or real estate to say, okay, please remove Jean-Philippe from the database, but what about all of the other databases that you have, let's say, throughout your company? And that's really a big problem, which obviously PM would address by being this single authority to manage adding or removing people from the databases, and as a result to remove the security risk of me still having a card to be able to go into the Paris office. There's also a cost element there that this pollution start to cost a lot of money. So depending on the size of your company, a card holder and identity is going to take space on databases, and you need CPU to manage that databases. And we've heard example where there's about the same amount of ghost card holder on a database that are actually employees in the company, and as a result, it's pushing, let's say, the system to have multiple servers that basically they're paying for, people that are not even in the company anymore. So there's really, let's say, a big issue around that, and probably a quick return on investment of going to a PM, versus continuing to manage the system as it is today.
Jonathan, you were, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about the ease of, managing these audits and sort of ensuring you don't have zombie card holders or ghost card holders floating around your company. How is that different in Clear ID versus a traditional access control system?
Yeah. So the way people have been doing it for years, right? Every quarter, as an example, the security department will go in the access control system and they will export a list of people per area. They're going to say, okay, give me the list of people who have access to that server room. Then they're going to create a spreadsheet, send that spreadsheet to the IT manager and ask him, okay, can you review that list and highlight in red using Excel every person that should be removed from that list. And then they're going to do this for hundreds of locations that are restricted location that needs to be reviewed as part of that audit. So it's a very, very manual process. And then obviously security, because most people will not reply to that email right away, right? They're going to take days, sometimes they forget. So security then is responsible to follow up with these people to make sure that the review is performed within, I don't know, 10 days or 15 days. With Clear ID, it's really a different approach. So again, with policies, you're going to say Andrew Elvish is in charge of IT. He's the manager of the IT room. Despina is in charge of HR. She's managing the HR safe room where they keep data about employees. And automatically in Clear ID, you'll say those room needs to be reviewed every quarter. And the system will automatically reach to the room owners, area owners, and ask them to perform the review. If they don't do it within 7 days, the system will keep reminding them that they need to do the review. Once they perform the review, the system will keep a report that says, okay, Despina did the review. She removed access to Andrew. She removed access to this person as part of that review. And the system will keep a trace of that review. Whenever an auditor comes in, you can show him that you've done your review for the last, they're going to ask, right, show me that you've done the review of the server room last year. And then you can simply do a search. You get a report in Clear ID that shows that the review has been performed by Despina, by Andrew, and who has been removed access. While in the other process, they need, like, once they receive that spreadsheet by email, they need to manually go and remove every single person from the system, and they need to keep a trace of that email exchange, like spreadsheet. So they need to store this somewhere on the network, because the auditor in 2 years from now can ask about that report like 2 years ago, right? So Clear ID simplifies the whole thing, keep record of all this. Really, at this point, right, security will simply need to manage the exception, and they won't be part of that whole process. They'll define the policy and make sure that people are doing what the system is asking to do.
Yeah, there's definitely a big difference between generating a report from your platform and handing over a bunch of Excel files with names crossed out or highlighted in a different color. Just that alone, the optics of that is, one is a very manual, cumbersome process. One is an automated platform-driven report that's generated.
And in terms of costs, I mean, right there, that is huge savings, saving all that time and resources that need to do that. That's the return on the investment right away in just a few months.
Absolutely.
So stay with that, Despina. I mean, this is great, cost savings, risk reduction, but I'm sure a lot of people in our audience today are listening and saying, you know, we've got this pandemic and work from home. I've got my hands full, and moving to a physical identity access management solution is not on my P1 list. Is this the time to be doing it, Despina? What's your call on that?
I think it's a great time. As I previously mentioned, this out-of-the-box solution, cloud-based solution, is much easier to install and faster to install than it ever was in previous times. And if you look at all the time that companies are spending now planning for deconfinement and trying to see who are they going to provide access to when, it's extremely cumbersome and time-consuming. And also the risk is pretty high of not providing the right access to the right individuals. And so I would say this is the excellent time to look at a physical identity and access management solution. As we spoke about all the different benefits, time savings, cost savings, it would be a perfect time to look at this.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to add to that, if I can, Andrew, is just right now, organizations are looking for, you know, touchless solutions has become such a hot topic amid this pandemic, and being able to manage these different credentials through physical identity access management system can be challenging, especially if you're issuing them to visitors, contractors, and other third parties. Things like QR codes, things like having a hand geometry profile that you maybe wave over a reader, things that are non-traditional credentials are coming into play, and now you need some way to manage those and issue those to people that might not be part of your organization, right? They might just be there for a day or two. So those are challenges that organizations are facing as they're trying to figure out, okay, we want to go touchless. What does that look like? How the heck do we issue those to other people that aren't part of the organization? It's a big challenge. So the folks that have previously invested in a solution like this are ahead of the curve. The others that haven't, they need to find a way to handle this now.
And I was thinking, you know, oftentimes I have friends who want to go back to their office to pick up some stuff or do certain things, and they have to fill out a form, find out who they have to email that form. And I could only imagine that person receiving all those requests and manually managing each one of them must be insane to do so every day. With a physical identity and access management, because again, it depends on an identity. If I go in and request access to the office, oftentimes the area owner may not even be asked anything based on my attributes and who I am and all the different components that make up my identity. I'll be provided temporary access automatically. So it really helps streamline the whole process and makes it much easier and never compromise security at the same time.
Yeah, as we know, Despina, we got an access control request yesterday for one of the It was very streamlined. I attest, I've used it. I've eaten our own dog food, drank our own champagne, however you want to say it. Jonathan, I want to come over to you. We have a question from our audience, which is a good question, and you can all join in on answering this. The audience member asks, you know, when you have a number of employees that have data controls attached to them with different credentials and different attributes, if you will, they often exist in many different databases. How does ClearID and Synergist work with these databases to pull together all of that information?
So there's different ways. With ClearID, we have a connector for LDAP, so to sync data with Active Directory. We have another connector that allows you to sync data from SQL database, CSV file. And then we have the API that could be used also if you have a more complex situation to synchronize data. So usually you'll need a way to uniquely identify someone between those databases, either an employee number, an email address, so you can synchronize data from different sources. to a single person. But yeah, it's something we work with different customers. Like sometimes it's very simple, sometimes it's a bit more complex and involve having some API communication. But ClearID is designed to do this. So the API is really oriented towards an identity, giving attributes like training to an identity, and then you can define policies. So it's really simple compared to an access control API because it's designed for this.
And do we have another question from our audience? You know, one of the questions that they sent in is that, you know, in a company culture that, you know, might be more resistant to change, how would you advise, you know, an audience member to sort of talk about implementing an IAM or a PIAM solution as a strategic undertaking, not just another IT project? Maybe JP, you might want to mention that. I know you have a lot of interaction with clients around the world on this topic.
Yeah, so there, I mean, well, PM might be new or not new, let's say, to you know, to the audience on this call, but IAM, so we remove, let's say, the physical. So IAM is actually something which has been on the works, I would say, for many and many years in the logical space of organization. The pandemic obviously has just thrown, let's say, a huge accelerator there, because I mean, you know, we're starting to, well, for most of us, spending, you know, more time today out of home. So it has been, let's say, you know, a big conversation for IT departments to you know, to find ways, let's say, to, you know, to make the access from home office, from different areas, let's say, more secure perhaps than before. So the, you know, the advice really is to talk with your IT department. You know, I'm pretty sure that must be the number one, if not in the top three conversation, let's say, that a CIO will have today. And I think that the fact that you bring the fact that you know, this notion of IAM can also be extended, let's say, to the premise should be, let's say, a pretty interesting conversation to them, because I think it would really run well the overall security strategy that an organization would put in place. So my advice really is to, you know, to go and talk with your IT department, the people in charge of the security, CIO, depending on the access. Try to see, you know, what is the strategy that they have for the logical access around IAM, and you know, start a conversation around the fact that, you know, the same thing is available for physical access to the buildings and the facilities.
Absolutely. And, you know, JP, you mentioned two different things, right? IAM and PIAM, and they're sort of different things. Jonathan, can you deconflict or let us know what
Sure.
how IAM and PIAM relate?
Yeah, so IAM systems are typically designed to grant access to software, right? So Andrew Elvish is VP. He has access to the VPN software. He has access to the CRM software. So IAM systems are really designed to grant access to software by adding people into Active Directory group mainly. This is good for the logical world, like software world, because I never grant access to a software only during business hours, only during weekdays. Usually I give you access to the software and I revoke you access once you change position. The PIM world exists because access control is slightly different than IT. Because if I grant you access to a location, I probably grant you access not 24/7, probably just during business hours. Maybe I'm going to grant you access just between Monday and Friday next week because you're installing an AC system in the server room. So the PIM world includes a bit more concept about schedulings and stuff like that that's specific to the physical access control world. So that's where you're going to see sometimes people will take an IAM system and they're going to try to control the access control system. They're going to spend a lot of money doing that. And after a while, they're going to realize, okay, that doesn't meet all our requirements. And that's where you can take an IAM system and connect it to a solution like ClearID, and they're going to work like really, really nicely together. Because The IAM system will have an onboarding workflow. It's going to say when someone joined the company, and then you can push information to ClearID at that point to make to automate the physical access portion of it. But really, PIM and IAM are really different. Typically, the IAM solution are super well integrated to all the IT software, but they're not integrated to the access control system. Like, you're gonna have to pay someone to do that integration, and that becomes really costly, and you won't even be able to manage schedule and start date and end date easily.
Well, that's a great, sorry, JP, go ahead.
No. So I mean, I fully agree with what Joe says, but from a process standpoint, I mean, the experience that I've seen is that ultimately the PM project, IT is highly involved into that because they're trying to drive, let's say, this philosophy of really restricting, let's say, access. Let it be a database. It's going to be, let's say, to a physical room. And well, from my experience, I mean, typically it's them who are carrying PM projects, at least here in Europe. That has been, let's say, my experience to that.
So I want to come to one last question that we had come in here, and Ty, I think you're probably well placed. It's around these ideas of zombie credentials, and all of these different card holder credentials floating around, or access floating around. Is there a risk now that offices are less populated? The audience member asked, now that there's less people in offices, that malicious actors might be trying their cards to sort of see where a traditional access control system has left them access to areas where they shouldn't have access? Do you think this is a risk?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these organizations, like you said, folks are working from home. They're vulnerable facilities. People that may have thought they could get access somewhere are now attempting to do that. And just having software in place that's going to identify some of those anomalies and what's happening is crucial. I mean, usually I want to say the human element in us, when there's a challenge or a problem, it's throw more resources at this, throw more bodies at this. Let's use technology to solve these problems, right? So I urge customers out there, if they haven't already, do a cost analysis. Take a look at what you're spending in human resources and any other manual process, and compare that with a physical identity access management platform and see what the ROI looks like. I think they're going to be very pleasantly surprised in what they find out, and I just feel like this is one area where you can use technology as opposed to the typical let's get more bodies at this, let's have more manual processes in place. And to your point, Jonathan, instead of adding more security to an area or physical guards, let's use a PM to start to automate some of the processes of bringing people back into the office in phases and shifts to still comply with those state or government mandates.
It's a great place to leave it, Ty. Very good summary. So today we've talked about zombie card holders, exorbitant cost of managing audits, and the sort of benefit that will come through a unified approach to access control and physical identity access management. It's been a really great discussion and a really enlightening one, everyone, in terms of how we can get back to work more safely and effectively, leveraging these everyday innovations from Genetec. And I encourage anybody who's interested in learning more about ClearID to just write to us, or even put your name into the comments box, and we'll get right back to you. It's an exciting product, and I was really happy to have you all join us here today on the Innovate Everyday series. And one note to all of you, our last Innovate Everyday series is coming up next week, when we talk about data sorry, I lost my train of thought there, machine learning and making sense of data, which will round this out. And I think people will see how this can dovetail with products like ClearID and the overall unified Genetec offering. So I thank you all. Thank you to our wonderful panelists here today. Thanks for joining me. And I would like to say thank you to everybody in the audience, and I wish you a very good day. Thank you for joining us. Talk soon.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.